Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Chicago, a city where rain sometimes fell like tears on the gray sidewalks, seemed to mirror Emily Johnson's life. At 22, Emily had already experienced more disillusionment than many would see in a lifetime. Orphaned since her teens, she had been bounced from one home to another, trying to find some semblance of security in a world that had turned its back on her. But instead of finding refuge, she had lost herself in drugs and alcohol, seeking to fill a void that no substance could truly assuage. That night, everything seemed normal. Emily was wandering down a dark alley, the smell of rain mingling with hot asphalt, when an unexpected invitation brought her to a private party in a luxurious downtown loft. The dim lights and loud music created an enchanting, almost hypnotic atmosphere. Strangers with polite faces and expensive clothes greeted her with smiles too perfect to be genuine. Emily, naive and under the influence of drugs she'd been given without her knowledge, let herself be drawn in. She thought she had the situation under control, but every gesture and every glance plunged her deeper into the unknown. It was there that she met Alexander Knight, a man of imposing charisma, with piercing eyes like blades of ice. He seemed distant, almost indifferent, but this detachment hid a power that few dared to challenge. A few months later, Emily discovered the full extent of what had happened that night. Her belly was swelling, and with it, the weight of a reality she could no longer escape. Two tiny lives were growing inside her, twins, the fruits of an act she had never consented to. Fear, shame, and despair swirled through her mind like a cyclone. How would she survive? And what would happen to Alexander if she dared to warn him? Sitting on the shabby bed in her small apartment, Emily stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror. Her gaze was that of a broken young woman, but somewhere deep within her eyes, a spark of strength remained. These children, Noah and Lily, would be her reason to fight. Even if the whole world seemed to be turning against her, even if Alexander Knight refused to believe they existed, Emily knew she had to prepare for an unpredictable future. This prologue marks the beginning of a path strewn with secrets, threats, but also unexpected discoveries and a love that will be born where all seemed lost. The twins would become the key to this destiny, and Emily, despite her fragility, would find within herself a strength she never suspected. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the torn curtains of Emily's apartment. The golden light seemed to dance across the dirty walls and moldy patches, as if to remind her that even in poverty, life went on. But for Emily, this day was unlike any other. She stood up slowly, a strange feeling tugging at the pit of her stomach. As she looked in the mirror, she felt a lump form in her throat. Her reflection, tired and gaunt, seemed to belong to a stranger. And yet, her belly betrayed a truth she had tried to deny. The weeks and months had passed so quickly that she had barely had time to realize what was happening to her. Now, there was no turning a blind eye to the reality: she was pregnant. And not with one, but two children. Emily sat on the bed, cupping her stomach in trembling hands. Memories of that fateful night hit her hard. The party, the strangers, the drunkenness, the discomfort, and Alexander Knight. She vaguely remembered his face, but everything else seemed hazy, blurred by drugs and anxiety. Only one thing was clear: these children were the result of that night, and their existence would change her life forever. Fear gripped her. How would she survive alone with two babies? Where would she go? And most importantly, what would Alexander do if he learned the truth? His name echoed in her mind like a distant shadow, a ghost of power and coldness she had never dared approach. Emily knew she had no idea what he was capable of, and yet, a part of her felt an inexplicable connection to this mysterious man. In the following days, Emily lived in a constant state of alert. Every sound from the street, every knock at the door made her jump. She began to feel the twins' movements, soft but persistent taps that seemed to want to communicate, or perhaps reassure her. Emily often cried, sitting in the darkness, her hands on her stomach, talking quietly to Noah and Lily. "I'll do anything for you. I promise," she whispered, hoping the children would understand. But even in her loneliness, a spark of strength was emerging. Emily knew she couldn't give up. These children, innocent and pure, were her chance to redeem herself, to rebuild something true and lasting. She began to make plans, to think about a future she could never have imagined, a safe place, protection for her twins, and perhaps, one day, a confrontation with the man who had changed her life forever. That night, as Chicago slept under a light, icy rain, Emily felt a new determination settle in her heart. The fear and despair were still there, but she was no longer alone. With Noah and Lily growing inside her, she felt ready to face the world. The journey had just begun. As the days passed, the weight of reality settled into Emily's life. Her small apartment, already cramped and dilapidated, seemed to close in on her like a cage. Every rickety piece of furniture, every crack in the wall reminded her of the precariousness of her situation. Yet she no longer had the right to fear alone. She now carried two innocent lives, two beings who depended entirely on her. Emily spent her days walking the streets of Chicago, searching for food, saving a few dollars to pay her rent. Passers-by sometimes looked at her suspiciously, some with pity, others with indifference. But she had grown accustomed to this mixture of judgment and loneliness. Every movement of the twins inside her gave her a little more courage. She spoke to them softly, sometimes even laughing to get them moving. "Noah, Lily, I know this seems difficult now, but we'll get through it," she murmured, caressing her rounded belly. The nights were the hardest. Alone in the silence of her apartment, Emily felt every knock and every small movement as a constant reminder of the responsibility awaiting her. She often thought of Alexander Knight, this unknown man whose life seemed so different from her own. Should she warn him? Tell him? Or continue to fend for herself, as she always had? The fear of his reaction paralyzed her. But deep inside, a small hope lingered. Maybe one day he would understand, accept these children, and become a part of their lives. Emily also began to think about what she wanted for her twins' future. She dreamed of a safe place, far from threats and judgment. She imagined a small house with a garden, where Noah and Lily could run free, far from the shadows of her past life. But each plan seemed impossible with the paltry means at her disposal. So she focused on the small things, saving money, eating well, taking care of herself so she would be strong on the day they were born. To survive, Emily had to confront her inner demons. The urge to return to drugs was sometimes overwhelming, especially in moments of loneliness and extreme fatigue. But feeling the twins' little tugs, she reminded herself that she no longer had the right to abandon herself. These children were her anchor, her reason to fight against everything that seemed to want to destroy her. One afternoon, while walking through an empty park to get some fresh air, Emily stopped by a bench and sat down, watching the trees and the falling leaves. She felt Lily give a light nudge, as if in response to her whisper, "I know you're scared, but we'll be together." A smile crossed her tired face. This small moment of togetherness comforted her. She understood that, even though the world was cruel, even though her situation was desperate, she was no longer alone. Every day, Emily grew stronger, finding within herself a resilience she never thought possible. Pregnancy, with its pain, worries, and hopes, became the engine of an inner transformation. She was no longer simply a young woman lost on the streets of Chicago. She was becoming a mother willing to do anything to protect her children, to defy fate, and to rebuild a life that had seemed impossible. The nights leading up to the birth had been a mixture of pain and anxiety. Emily felt the twins moving more and more, their little kicks a constant reminder that the dreaded moment was approaching. She had spent hours breathing deeply, trying to calm her fear, but each contraction reminded her of the magnitude of what was about to happen. The morning it all began, Emily felt an instinctive panic. The pain grew sharper, more urgent. The small apartment felt too small, stifling, as she tried to muster the strength to get up and go to the hospital. Every step was an effort, every breath a battle against fear and fatigue. But she knew she had to keep going, for Noah and Lily. At the hospital, the staff quickly attended to her. The white, sterile corridors, the hum of machines, and the professional voices were a stark contrast to the confusion and loneliness she had felt until then. Emily squeezed the nurse's cold hands and tried to focus on her breathing, repeating in her head the mantra she had invented, for them, for them. The next few hours were a mixture of intense pain and adrenaline. Emily screamed and cried, yet amidst it all, a glimmer of hope persisted. Then, finally, the moment arrived. The first cry pierced the air, a sound that made Emily waver between exhaustion and wonder. A small boy with dark eyes was placed on her chest. She stared at him, mouth agape, unable to speak, but her heart filled with an emotion she had never known. It was Noah. A few minutes later, a little girl was placed against her. Her fine hair, soft skin, and tiny hands seemed to erase, if only for a moment, all the trauma of the past. Emily named her Lily. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she kissed each tiny face, each fragile finger. For the first time in a long time, she felt pure happiness, a reason to carry on despite everything. But beyond the joy, a shadow lingered. She thought of Alexander Knight, the man she knew almost nothing about, but whose blood now flowed through the veins of her children. Should she warn him? How would he react? Emily knew that this meeting, one day, would be inevitable. And she dreaded that day as much as she hoped for it. Despite her fears, Emily felt strangely strong. Noah and Lily had given her an unexpected power, the ability to overcome fear, pain, and uncertainty. They were proof that, even in chaos, life could offer miracles, however tiny and fragile. As she cradled the twins in her arms, Emily made a silent promise: no matter what, she would protect these children from all threats, past and future, and she would do everything to make their lives better than her own. That night, Emily finally got some sleep, her arms around Noah and Lily, feeling a glimmer of peace for the first time. But in the back of her mind, the shadow of Alexander Knight already loomed, heralding challenges she could never have imagined. The journey had only just begun. The weeks following the birth were a mixture of intense happiness and constant fear for Emily. Every smile from Noah and Lily, every reassuring whisper she heard at night, reminded her why she must stay strong. But one question haunted her day and night: how to tell Alexander Knight that he was the father of her children. Emily had never met this man except through hazy memories and stories she'd been told. Powerful, distant, almost inhuman in his apparent perfection, and now the unwitting father of her twins. The thought of contacting him frightened her. What if his reaction was hostile? What if, instead of accepting the children, he sought to alienate them from her? After days of consideration, she received a letter through an anonymous lawyer. The letter detailed Alexander's full identity: an influential businessman in Europe, with interests in several countries, and, most importantly, unaware of his children's existence. Emily read and reread the information, her hands trembling and her heart pounding. It was an opportunity, but also an immense risk. She finally mustered up the courage and wrote a letter. Every word was carefully chosen, every sentence carefully measured to avoid anger or rejection. She explained the situation without overdramatizing, emphasizing the children's safety and well-being. She ended with a simple request: I'll let you decide how you want to be involved in your children's lives. The wait that followed was excruciating. Emily constantly checked her mailbox, her phone, hoping for a reply. The nights were long and silent, interrupted only by the twins' movements. Every little knock from Noah or Lily seemed to remind her that her children's fate now depended on a man she hardly knew. Then, one day, the reply arrived. Alexander Knight himself had taken the trouble to reply, his letter cold but measured. He neither confirmed nor denied paternity, but asked to meet Emily and the children. This meeting would seal Noah and Lily's future, and Emily knew it. She felt both apprehension and a strange relief. After all, she was no longer alone in bearing the weight of this truth. Preparing for the meeting was another challenge. Emily chose a neutral location, discreet but safe. She brought Noah and Lily, their little sleepy faces against her, and felt a wave of emotion wash over her. What would Alexander say? How would he react? Everything was uncertain, and yet, deep down, Emily felt that this moment would be decisive for her children's future. When Alexander entered the room, his icy gaze fell on Emily and the twins. A heavy silence fell, heavy with questions and implicit judgments. Then, upon seeing the children, something changed in his expression. Curiosity, surprise, perhaps even a hint of guilt. Emily watched every micro-expression, every blink, knowing that this meeting would decide the path they would all take together. This first encounter was a mixture of tension and hope. Emily understood that the road would be long and fraught with difficulties, but for the first time in a long time, she felt that the future could be different, and that her children might have a chance to be loved, respected, and protected. Emily thought, after meeting Alexander, she could breathe a little easier. She was wrong. Shortly after that first meeting, worrying signs began to appear. Persistent stares in the street, cars that seemed to follow her, silent phone calls in the middle of the night. Every detail sent shivers down her spine. She had never faced this kind of danger, and for the first time, she understood that her life, and that of Noah and Lily, were at risk. One night, as she was returning from a doctor's visit, Emily felt hurried footsteps behind her. Her heart was pounding, each beat pounding in her chest like a drum signaling imminent danger. She quickened her pace, clutching her children, her arms shaking with fear and determination. In the dim light, she made out a blurry figure disappearing around the corner. Was it someone who wanted to harm them? Or simply chance? Emily could no longer ignore these signals. She decided to tighten security around them. Every move, every exit was calculated. Emily changed her route, avoided familiar places, and made sure someone she trusted always knew where she was. Even in her apartment, she installed extra locks, locking every door and window. The twins were her top priority. Their innocence had to be preserved, even if it meant living in constant fear. But the danger wasn't just physical. Anonymous messages began to arrive, veiled warnings, implicit threats about her past and her ability to protect her children. Emily felt the tension rise inside her. Every letter, every call, every suspicious look reinforced her certainty that they were being watched. And the more she thought about it, the more doubts crept in. Was this all coming from old enemies from the past, or was it Alexander's associates? This uncertainty weighed on her spirits. Sometimes Emily sat in the dark with Noah and Lily asleep against her, stroking them gently to reassure herself as much as them. She knew the world could be cruel, but she also felt a new strength within her. This fear wouldn't destroy her. On the contrary, it would make her more vigilant, more determined, more ready to protect her children at all costs. One afternoon, while running some errands, Emily noticed a man in a suit following her from a distance. Every move she made seemed scrutinized, every breath observed. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt her adrenaline pumping. She realized she could no longer simply react, she had to anticipate, act, and anticipate every threat. This period of constant tension and alert shaped Emily in ways she never imagined. She became more cautious, more strategic, but also more aware of the importance of loving and protecting her twins. Noah and Lily were her light in the darkness, and each threat strengthened her determination to give them a safe and stable future. As she rocked Lily that night, Emily promised herself that no matter the dangers and shadows that loomed over them, she would never give in. The twins were her anchor, her strength, and her hope. And no one, not the past, not the strangers watching over her, could ever harm them as long as she was there. Emily knew she could no longer stay in Chicago. The threats were too close, too tangible. Every street, every corner seemed to be under surveillance. Even the apartment she thought was safe was becoming an invisible prison. She made a drastic decision. She had to leave, take Noah and Lily far from this city, far from those who wanted to harm them. Preparing for the trip was a huge challenge. She didn't have much money and had to remain discreet. Her luggage consisted of a few clothes for herself and the twins, blankets, and medication for essential care. Each item she carried represented a delicate balance between necessity and survival. She had learned to travel light, but every step was fraught with tension and worry. The day of her departure, Emily felt her heart sink. She took one last look at the apartment that had been their temporary refuge. The cracked walls and worn furniture had borne witness to her fears and hopes, but it was time to leave it all behind. With Noah and Lily clutched to her, she left the place without a sound, each beat of her heart echoing like a drum announcing an uncertain future. The train ride to New York was long and trying. Emily remained vigilant, scrutinizing every face, every movement in the carriages. The twins slept peacefully against her, oblivious to the danger surrounding them. Through the window, she saw urban and rural landscapes passing by, each marked by light or shadow, like a reflection of her own life. In New York, she reunited with a trusted friend, Marcus Reed, a former co-worker who had always been loyal and protective. He agreed to house them temporarily, giving Emily a safe place to breathe and plan for what came next. The first few days were filled with relief mixed with constant vigilance. Emily knew threats could catch up with her at any moment, but Marcus's presence offered a semblance of security she hadn't felt in months. Despite the fear and fatigue, Emily began to imagine a different future. She visualized walks with Noah and Lily in Central Park, shared laughter, and a daily life that, though modest, would be free from the dangers of the past. But each dream was tinged with uncertainty. She knew the time would come when Alexander, and perhaps others, would return to their lives. She had to be ready. During her stay in New York, Emily grew even closer to her children. Every smile, every movement from Noah and Lily, every little breath reassured her and gave her the strength to continue. She understood that her role went beyond that of a simple mother. She had to be their shield, their guide, and the only constant in an unstable world. This stage of the journey transformed Emily. The fear hadn't disappeared, but she had learned to master it. The unexpected journey wasn't just an escape, it was the beginning of a new life, a necessary step to protect her children and prepare for the next confrontations. And somewhere, deep inside her, a spark of hope persisted. One day, all this chaos could transform into a safe and loving future. Emily had been planning this meeting for weeks. The location was neutral, a small, discreet cafe in New York City, away from prying eyes. Every detail had been considered, the time, the distance from her apartment, even how she would hold Noah and Lily close. Yet, despite all her preparation, her heart was pounding when the silhouette of Alexander Knight appeared behind the door. Alexander was exactly as she'd imagined him, tall, imposing, elegant, with that piercing gaze that seemed able to read every thought. But for the first time, Emily noticed something else, a hesitation, almost a flutter in his expression. When his eyes met those of the twins, Noah and Lily, something changed. His features relaxed, just for a moment, revealing a mixture of surprise, emotion, and perhaps guilt. Emily stepped forward cautiously, hugging her children close. "Mr. Knight. I'm Emily Johnson. These are your children, Noah and Lily," she said, her voice shaky but determined. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Alexander stared at her, unable to look away from the small faces that seemed to reflect his own blood. After a long moment, he took a deep breath and sat down. I didn't know. I really didn't know," he murmured, as if to convince himself. Emily felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly, but she remained on guard. She didn't yet know if this man would accept this reality or reject it. Time passed, and the conversations began timidly. Emily explained the pregnancy, the birth, and the difficulties she had gone through to protect the children. Alexander listened, sometimes silent, sometimes asking specific questions about the twins, their health, their habits. Each answer reinforced an unexpected feeling in him, responsibility, curiosity, and, despite himself, a beginning of affection for these little beings whose existence he was unaware of. But the meeting wasn't without tension. Emily sensed Alexander's natural distance, his way of controlling his emotions and reactions, like a shield he used to protect himself. She understood that it wouldn't be easy. Between them, invisible barriers had been built, made of past, fear, and social differences. Yet she felt a strange sensation, something had changed that day. The twins had created a silent and powerful bond, capable of forcing two opposing worlds to meet. At the end of the meeting, Alexander stepped away for a moment to reflect. Emily stayed with Noah and Lily, watching the light from the cafe reflect off their sleepy little faces. She wondered how life might turn out now that their father was aware of their existence. The future remained uncertain, but for the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps Alexander would become an ally, or at least a supportive parent. This meeting marked a turning point. The emotions were complex, mixed with fear, defiance, curiosity, and a tiny bit of trust. Emily knew the road would be long, but she was ready to face whatever it would take to protect Noah and Lily and, who knows, maybe build something new with Alexander. The arrival of Emily and the twins in Alexander Knight's life did not go unnoticed. His powerful and influential family was known for its strict control over every aspect of Alexander's life. When they learned of Noah and Lily's existence, a wave of anger, mistrust, and strategic calculation washed over Emily. A few days after the meeting, Emily was invited to the Knights' main residence for a formal luncheon. The atmosphere was frosty. Alexander's mother, Margaret Knight, a woman with a stern face and piercing eyes, scrutinized Emily's every move. Her words, outwardly polite, were laden with judgment and implicit reproach. "So, these are your children, and you really think you can influence Alexander?" she asked, leaving a silence heavy with menace. Emily felt her heart clench, but she didn't show her fear. She took a deep breath and replied calmly, "I'm here to protect my children. They have the right to know their father. Nothing more, nothing less." Margaret's eyes narrowed, but she didn't dare say anything further. Emily knew she'd just scored a point, but the fight was only just beginning. Alexander's brother, Thomas, meanwhile, adopted a different strategy. He attempted to seduce Noah and Lily with gifts and promises, seeking to drive a wedge between Emily and the children. Emily, aware of his intentions, remained vigilant, refusing to allow her children to be manipulated. Every gesture on her part became an exercise in patience and caution, every smile and every word carefully calibrated to protect her little family. Alexander, in the midst of this conflict, vacillated between family loyalty and paternal responsibility. He quickly realized that the presence of Emily and the twins was upsetting the balance of his family. Tensions were palpable, and every interaction became a silent battleground. Emily felt that their emotional survival depended on their ability to navigate these dangerous waters, where one misstep could destroy everything. Despite the pressure and manipulation, Emily discovered an inner strength she'd never suspected. She learned to read the hidden agendas behind polite words, to anticipate the moves of those who sought to harm her children. Noah and Lily, oblivious to this adult drama, became the driving force behind her determination. She wouldn't give in. Never. This chapter of their lives had a profound impact on Emily. She understood that protecting her children meant not only keeping them away from physical danger, but also shielding them from power struggles, greed, and manipulation. The Knight family, with all its power and secrets, presented a formidable challenge. But Emily, armed with courage and maternal love, was ready to face every obstacle to ensure a safe and stable future for Noah and Lily. As she left the residence, Emily looked at the sleeping children in the car and promised herself that nothing and no one could separate them from her. She knew the family conflict was only the beginning of a long journey, but she was ready to fight. For them. For her family. For the hope of a better future. The following weeks were marked by a false lull. Emily thought family tensions were the worst she would face, but she was wrong. One evening, as she was getting Noah and Lily ready for bed, an unusual noise outside caught her attention. Hurried footsteps, the creaking of metal, someone was approaching their apartment. Her heart raced, fear gripped her, but she knew immediately that this was no accident. She grabbed the children and held them close, her hands trembling but resolute. Alexander, who had come to see them that evening, immediately understood the gravity of the situation. Emily's eyes, large and alert, left no doubt, they were in danger. Together, they locked all the doors and windows, but the danger wasn't limited to the outside. Threat seemed to surround them on all sides, like an invisible shadow ready to strike. Suddenly, an anonymous call interrupted the silence. A cold, emotionless voice whispered, "We know you're here, and we'll come for them if you don't cooperate." Emily felt a cold chill run through her body. Alexander, usually calm and controlled, clenched his jaw. This was more than just a family dispute, this was a direct attack on his children and Emily, and there was no way he could ignore the threat. They had to act quickly. Alexander used his contacts to organize immediate protection, while Emily prepared the children to flee. Every move was calculated, every decision crucial. Stress and fear brought them closer, and despite the tension, a silent bond formed between them. They were now united by a common cause, the safety of Noah and Lily. The escape was perilous. Crossing the streets of New York under the cover of night, Emily carried Lily in her arms while Alexander held Noah tightly. They slipped through alleys, avoiding suspicious glances and using the shortcuts Emily had come to know. Every sound, every breath, every light was a potential red flag. But despite the fear, Emily felt a new strength within her. She was no longer simply a protective mother, she was a living shield, capable of anything to save her children. After several hours of anguish, they reached a safe place, prepared in advance by Alexander. The exhausted twins slept peacefully, unaware of the danger they had just encountered. Emily collapsed onto a chair, tears streaming down her cheeks. The fear wasn't over yet, but the relief of seeing the children temporarily safe gave her renewed energy. That night, Emily realized the full extent of the reality. Protecting her children would never be limited to simple actions or safe havens. Threats could come from anywhere, and their safety depended on constant vigilance and unwavering courage. But for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face those dangers. With Alexander by her side, and with Noah and Lily in her arms, she knew they could survive, no matter what the world threw at them. As the city slept under a veil of mystery and silence, Emily made a silent promise: nothing, and no one, would ever tear this family apart. And even if the future was uncertain and fraught with danger, she was willing to face anything for them. Time had passed since fleeing to New York, and each day had brought its own trials, tensions, and challenges. But gradually, Emily felt a fragile calm settle into their lives. The immediate threats had been removed, and Alexander's constant presence at her side brought a stability she had never known. For the first time, she could breathe, even if it was tinged with alertness. Alexander had taken steps to secure a new apartment, away from prying eyes and past dangers. Every detail had been considered: separate bedrooms for Noah and Lily, safe and comfortable spaces, and a warm, almost familial atmosphere. Emily, who had lived in poverty and fear, was moved to see her children smile and play in a safe environment. Every laugh, every small gesture of complicity with their parents became proof that life could offer a second chance. But the future held more than security. Emily and Alexander began to form a deep bond based on respect, trust, and mutual understanding. Painful memories and past mistakes remained, but they learned to move forward together, one step at a time. Emily saw in Alexander not only the father of her children, but also a partner ready to face challenges with her, and Alexander discovered in Emily a maternal love and resilience he had never encountered elsewhere. Noah and Lily were growing up innocent and curious, but their presence was now the heart of this new life. Emily savored every moment: the morning cuddles, the bursts of laughter during playtime, the first words and the baby steps. Each moment was a reminder of what she had fought for: to protect her children, to give them a better future, and to rebuild her own life from the wreckage of the past. One evening, as the sunset bathed the apartment, Emily watched Alexander play with the twins on the living room rug. She felt a warmth fill her heart. The road had been long, strewn with shadows and fears, but they had arrived at a place where safety, love, and serenity could finally exist. Emily understood that life would never be perfect, that challenges would always arise. But she had learned one essential lesson: strength comes from love, determination, and resilience. And as long as Noah and Lily were by her side, and Alexander shared that responsibility with her, she knew they could face whatever the future held. As night fell over the city, Emily held the twins close, Alexander wrapping his protective arm around them. In that small apartment, far from the threats and shadows of the past, they were finally a family. A reinvented family, strong and united, ready to write a future filled with hope, laughter, and precious moments. And in the peaceful silence of this new night, Emily told herself that, despite all that had been lost, they had found what really mattered: safety, love, and the promise of a bright future for Noah and Lily.